Hey everyone, Brittany and Jacob Keith here today to share part two of Jacob's story. First, we're going to do a little overview of the last time we spoke. So to recap, Jacob he was in the child welfare since the day he was born because his mom was a drug user. He went to multiple foster homes. After the second home, he was put up for adoption by the state and he was adopted by Jeannie Romano. Jacob was not given the opportunity to consent to this adoption, and Mary Mayhew signed off on it, who is also the subject of a 2017 Inspector General audit. Imagine that. Jeannie renamed Jacob after her deceased husband. There were many broken promises. Jeannie didn't use the adoption assistance on Jacob's needs. And the NGOs, the non-government organizations, make it easy for fraud within the system. Eventually, Jeannie and her daughter abused Jacob, and law enforcement was not much help. They were blindsided. Jacob eventually fought back against the abuse, defending himself. So Jeannie used the crisis hotline and would paint Jacob as a problem child. Crisis made the wrong call and unnecessarily segregated Jacob in the ER, which is a crime. Jeannie put Jacob into many different residential facilities, and Jacob was checked into the programs under different names, which he didn't find out until he was 18 and got his records, which were full of fraud. Good programs and bad programs in Jacob's experience. Sweetser, NFI, and AMHC, which are all NGOs, are programs that he would say treated him well. And the bad ones would be Goodwill Hinckley. They are known to hit children, and they are a behavioral health home. They use the local police force against the children, unfortunately. Spurwink is another bad program, and Mount Prospect Academy in New Hampshire is also known for abusing children, and they actually had a child die while Jacob was in their care. At 17, Jeannie abandoned Jacob at a homeless shelter, which is a Class D crime, and the Oxford County Sheriff Department did not take action. Jacob found a ton of fraud, as I mentioned, and so he has built an evidence folder, and he became aware of the False Claims Act and has been trying his hardest to start a case, but he's found it's hard to find a lawyer who will take this on. So Jacob, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. Last time when we left off, you mentioned a kickback scheme. Could you
Yep.
explain to us how the Department of Justice failed to recognize this when they sued the state?
Yeah, so they should have caught on to the fraud and addressed it before it went unanswered and impacted Maine's economy. I have the Department of Justice lawsuit up here on my screen as number one, just for a refresh. This is the press release. Justice Department sues Maine for violating the Americans with Disability Acts.
Wow.
So that addresses how they sued Maine for unnecessarily segregating children with behavioral health disabilities in hospitals, residential facilities, and a state-operated juvenile detention facility. This was the press release that anyone can find, and ultimately it looks like they just made some changes in the system, which changes are great, but it really doesn't do anything for the kids that already went through it.
Can you tell us what it means to be segregated at the hospital?
So most of the facilities are locked, which means you can't go outside if you want to. A lot of them are very small, smaller than your house. It's usually like a hallway, and to get out of the building, it's locked. So that would be segregated essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I was in there under insurance, paid for by Title IVE, and that ties itself to both the Social Security Administration and the federal government. There's a lot of fraud going through that program. So here I have the Federal Bureau of Investigation's page on healthcare fraud. Healthcare fraud can be committed by medical providers, patients, and others who intentionally deceive the healthcare system to receive illegal benefits or payments.
Mm.
All right, so it affects everyone, individuals and businesses alike, especially taxpayers. And here is the interesting part. It can raise health insurance premiums, expose you to unnecessary medical procedures, which essentially we encountered in those facilities, more so along the lines of false diagnosis and medication that didn't need to be given out. There weren't exactly procedures, but that would fit the description. And last but not least, it can increase taxes.
Oh, imagine that.
Yes, imagine that. Just a second. I'm trying to get something out of my screen here.
Just when we thought our healthcare couldn't get any more fraudulent.
Hmm. So now I have the HHS Inspector General audit. Maine did not comply with screening, assessment, and investigation requirements for responding to reports of child abuse and neglect. Now, why would they do that? Because it wasn't once or twice, but actually they estimated that 94% of child abuse and neglect reports received were not in compliance of one or more requirements related to immediate screening, risk and safety assessment, and investigation. So they had a motive and a purpose for failing this. And according to the FBI, we see that healthcare fraud raises premiums and increases taxes. So let's take a visit to Maine's current economy. We have Janet Mills raising our taxes, and
Everywhere
we
and
have,
anywhere.
yep, we have, one just a second, need to find it.
I'm seeing on Google that in Maine, the Office of Child and Family Services is responsible for child welfare and child protection services. And each year, 18,000 children are reported due to suspected child abuse or neglect. Do you know if yeah, the specific ranking of Maine as the number one state for child abuse within OCFS? It's
Yeah,
really
so there
sad.
is also that statistic how we are the number one in the nation, which is not good. And they've done it for a purpose. They've done it to raise your taxes, and they've done it to raise your health insurance premiums. That benefits the state and affects the taxpayer, and it's essentially double jeopardy to those who have been in the system because DHHS, they don't give me any benefits. They know what they did. That's probably why
Mhm.
they don't give me any benefits because I exposed them. But it's essentially double jeopardy because I am also now a taxpayer.
Right.
And that is the current effect on Maine's economy. So it doesn't just affect the people that were in these hospitals, but it affects the taxpayer and benefits the state.
We are just a cash cow when it comes to taxes
Mm-hmm.
for this state. So this is the main wire.
Yep. This was their article on health insurance premiums expected to skyrocket next year for Mainers.
No. Mm.
So now the public knows why this has been caused. Apparently, Maddie Daughtry established a task force to figure out why these things have been caused, and I can tell you right here and now, so that task force is probably more of a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Well, Maddie Daughtry is kind of a waste of space inside of that
Yep,
building.
yep.
Kind of like
All
Shenna
right.
Bellows investigating herself for the ballots going missing.
Oh yeah. Now they this isn't the only stuff they slide under the table.
Maine feels like a hub for just fraud and evil at this point.
It is.
Does that say an average increase of 26%?
It does. Average increase of 26%, while small groups will experience an average hike of 19%.
Oh my gosh.
There's already been a
Wow.
protest or two on this, and Maine protests are kind of a joke, but I'll leave it at that.
So, was there any law enforcement misconduct in the facilities that Maine placed children at?
There was quite a bit of law enforcement misconduct. Maine police are getting famous for this, thanks to Corn Pop. And
Thank you, Corn
they would
Pop.
often, yes, they would often get involved in these facilities when we ran away. And I mean, they would bring us back, and that wasn't misconduct. That's kind of what needs to happen. But then they didn't do any investigation afterwards, because we don't run away from these programs because we wake up one day and we're like, hey, let's just run away. Most of us already kind of had a sense something was wrong, but we were too young to really know what it was.
Hmm. Did you ever run away?
I tried to book it quite a few times, and I was just brought back by the police. They didn't ask me any questions. They didn't want to know what was going on or my side of the story. Just put me right back in there.
Do you want to give us your side of the story on a couple of accounts or?
I will give you my side of the story, yes. So, like I said, Goodwill Hinckley, I don't know how they're not in a lawsuit, but out of all the programs I encountered, they were the worst when it came to law enforcement misconduct. So I was a little mischievous, you know. I mean, I engaged in some property destruction, got into a few fights here and there, ran away. But there was a specific incident, I believe it was running away and property destruction, where the cops brought me back to the property. I was upset and I got physical with them. Now,
Mm.
I think I was in the right to resist arrest, and I definitely was with what I know now. But they brought me to the police station in cuffs, and remembering this now, I actually believe it was an incident at the school building at Goodwill Hinckley. A lot of these places have schools that are on the same property but separate from the facility. The schools really aren't bad, but what happens in the facilities can sometimes carry over to school. Um, so when I was arrested and brought to the police station, they took my fingerprints, and but they didn't give me a lawyer. And I would think that would be against my rights. I mentioned I think it was the 14th Amendment last time.
Yep.
And essentially, they just let me go. I returned to the facility. I had summonses, but I never went to court, which was really odd. Um, I'd assume my guardian and other people made decisions I wasn't aware of, and ultimately I wound up with a probation officer. Well, he made me do restorative justice and talk to the people I apparently offended, and that went well. And then I started telling him, hey, look, this is some of the stuff that happens in here. And eventually he disappeared, like he wasn't part of the process anymore. Because A, I did what he told me to do, and B, the staff in those places, they're not exactly not guilty. Um,
Mhm. They're not innocent.
mm. So,
I just
yep.
could I read the 14th Amendment for everybody? Um,
Hmm.
Grants citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including formerly enslaved people, and ensured that all citizens would have equal protection under the law. So you would be a citizen. And I agree, your
Yep.
rights were violated by not getting a lawyer. So continue.
Specifically the due process and equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment.
Exactly. Um, so from there, how did it go?
So, After that happened, a little while down the road, I was sent to New Hampshire, and I can cover New Hampshire first if we want to cycle back.
Sure.
Um, in New Hampshire, I was sent to Mount Prospect Academy, and it's a pretty good place to start off. Um, as usual, if you live in a hallway, you get antsy and other kids causing behaviors because children, they act off of their environment. So eventually, I would get into more fights and whatnot, and the staff would restrain you. Well, eventually, the staff at Mount Prospect Academy got sick and tired of restraining us, and it was basically wrestling at that point. A lot of us got injuries. There was quite a few Maine kids in there, a lot of Vermont kids, out of staters in general. So I'm gonna address that facility real quick. This
Yeah,
is from a
let's do
law
that.
firm in New Hampshire called Levi Konigsberg, apparently. I didn't reach out to this one, but I've reached out the others and I haven't gotten anywhere, so I haven't really continued trying to reach out to lawyers if they're not gonna really do much. I would even represent myself at this point, but I don't know everything they know, so I wouldn't really know how to go about this in a courtroom. But
And it is a
in
tricky
April,
game.
yeah, in April 2025, it was reported that Mount Prospect Academy faced about 125 lawsuits, most filed since 2022, alleging that students were there suffered physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. Now, I didn't suffer any sexual abuse. Um, there was definitely physical abuse and psychological abuse. What obviously didn't help was the medication that I didn't need. That
Hmm.
came with all sorts of side effects. Believe it or not, I used to be like 230, maybe 245 pounds. When my guardian abandoned me, basically I had to stop the meds cold turkey, which was good in the long run, but not good because of the effects. Within months, I was like back down to 190, 200 pounds, which is good for someone my age and height. All right.
Wow.
So back to
I
Mount
have a
Prospect
brother.
Academy. Yep.
My brother was also thrown on Ritalin at a very high dose when he was like 6 years old. And he was always overweight too. And I never tied that together that it was the
Mm,
drugs that made him overweight. And then he also cold turkeyed them when he was a teenager. And the weight, more or less, he wasn't as big as he was. So
yeah.
that's sad.
Yeah, one of the meds they had me on was Thorazine, which I found an old military record how it's actually classified as a sedative by the United States Army. And I had a lot of
Wow.
sleeping problems in those places because essentially these meds would keep me knocked out and then they would get mad when I didn't want to get up and go to school. They
Oh,
caused it. Um,
yeah.
but back
That's
to what
psychological abuse for sure.
it very much so is. One former student alleged he experienced discrimination and abuse, was isolated for days at a time, severely beaten by staff, and claimed staff gave drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol to certain students. So they
Ouch.
did. I myself didn't see cigarettes or alcohol, but I saw vapes and I know of the drugs that they brought in and essentially killed a kid. The whole entire state of New Hampshire came in and had to interview everybody.
So by drugs, you mean like street drugs, not pharmaceutical?
Yeah, I believe it was methamphetamine that killed that child.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. New Hampshire is not much better than Maine in any of this, and I will interrupt this page to go to a different page real quick. This is a bill that I believe is being addressed in the legislature this year, LD 1893. So, Assistant House Majority Leader Louis Gramlich, a Democrat from Old Orchard Beach, is introducing LD 1893. I believe it may have been addressed, but I don't know if it's been decided on. Essentially, the bill would transfer Maine's existing child welfare ombudsman into a new independent agency with expanding responsibilities for Maine children. They want to essentially copy like an Office of Child Advocate, and it's not a bad idea, but they need to know that New Hampshire is behind whatever they've been told, no better than Maine, really. Um, and to show that, I have not only the Mount Prospect Academy thing, which I'll finish reading. Another student allegedly said he was physically abused almost daily, raped by a staff member twice, sexually abused by a female employee, and smoked cannabis with staff members multiple times. A third former student alleged he was physically assaulted by several staff members during restraints, sexually abused by a female employee, and said his reports of abuse were ignored, leading him to eventually run away from the school. Now, we kids actually thought the police would help us, so we would like book it to the police station sometimes, but like I said, they don't actually help at all.
So I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I remember you mentioning something about winding up with a knee in your back.
Yeah, that was at Goodwill Hinckley. So essentially, I call it I got George Floyded because when I tried resisting arrest, they went very physical with me, and I had a knee in my back. Now, they did things to other children. I believe they actually tased a kid at one point. That one got sent off to jail, I believe. Um, I was smaller, so I couldn't really injure anybody if I wanted to, but the bigger kids in there, like some of them caused some severe injuries to the faculties. I may have caused a little like minor injuries to other people, but I don't think I ever really hurt anyone.
Well, and you kids are going through so much already, and it's so sad that these people inside of these facilities, they really don't seem to have much sympathy or empathy and kind
Yeah.
of feed into the destruction uh,
hmm
mindset of these kids. It's really sad.
Yeah. So this is about YDC in New Hampshire. YDC is Maine's version of Long Creek Kid Jail. Um, and New Hampshire ultimately established a settlement fund, and it was created to avoid sending thousands of cases through the courts while providing compensation to victims of alleged abuse at state-run facilities, including the Youth Development Center in Manchester. Now, I think Maine should establish a settlement fund, but I mean, they did this to essentially rob taxpayers. Like, I call this a very large kickback scheme. So, these funds that they're now accumulating for their crime shouldn't be their money. It should be to the victims. And definitely the people that were in these facilities were the primary victim, but it's also affecting the taxpayer. So they got to do something about that.
It also seems like a way to not address the problem and show the public what's really going on. As you say, sweep it under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the public would like to see these cases and what is going on inside of these facilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Um, let's see.
So are we, have you gone through what you want to talk about with this article?
I have, yep.
Okay. Um, so personally, have you made progress with your
No,
situation?
I haven't made any progress in my situation because I've been shut down by obstruction of justice. That started with when I got out of the facilities and everything. That started with the Oxford County Sheriff's Department. I was 17 and they could have easily done something about it. Instead, my statute of limitations expired due to law enforcement misconduct and obstruction of justice, which I'll read very quickly. The Department of Justice vigorously investigates and, where the evidence permits, prosecutes allegations of constitutional violations by law enforcement officers. So, Fairfield PD, Oxford County Sheriffs, those are the number two people in this
Mhm.
case. The department's investigations most often involve alleged uses of excessive force, but also include sexual misconduct, theft, false arrest, and deliberate indifference to serious medical needs or substantial risk of harm to a person in custody. These cases typically involve police officers, jailers, correctional officers, probation officers, prosecutors, judges, and other federal, state, or local law enforcement officials. The department's authority extends to all law enforcement conduct, regardless of whether an officer is or off duty, so long as he or she is acting or claiming to act in his or her official capacity. In addition to constitutional violations, the department prosecutes law enforcement officers for related instances of obstruction of justice, which is what I encountered. So after I encountered the obstruction of justice, I went to the Maine State Police and met up with Trooper McCarthy. Trooper McCarthy essentially did his job, didn't really agree with each other, but he got my case to a prosecutor and it was dismissed. So, as far as I'm concerned, whoever dismissed it should be facing obstruction of justice as well. Um, I had a couple emails with Neil McLean, who I assumed was the district attorney, and I don't think he was the person who dismissed my case, but whoever did dismiss my case was either just not informed of everything, made a poor decision, or knew what was going on and committed obstruction of justice.
Mhm.
So,
Or they're covering
I'll,
it up.
oh yeah.
Mhm. So from a political standpoint, how do you see this?
So, before I answer that question, I'm just going to say I did call the FBI's Boston office.
Oh, okay.
Um, they weren't really helpful, surprisingly. I thought they would be. She kind of seemed in a rush on the phone, and she told me basically if they wanted to know more, a federal agent would reach out to me. And I haven't heard from any federal agent. She kept on asking if I had a lawyer, and I was trying to explain, like, why I don't have one, and she kind of just kept shutting me down on the phone. Now, that stuff is recorded. You actually have to give them a lot of information just to call in, like your whole entire identity. So I'm sure that conversation is could be pulled up. I'm not trying to get
I'm
anyone
sure you could
fired, but this stuff needs to be addressed.
you could probably file a hefty priced FOIA request.
Mm,
And I'm sure she was happy to hear you don't have a lawyer because they're not feeling their heels on the fire, so to speak.
mm. So let's just want to watch a small clip here. This is the Sean Ryan show with Steve Robinson, and essentially right here they're gonna answer part of the problem I'm encountering.
But there was something that we were talking about with the Maine's Attorney General, which or lack thereof.
Well, just the lack of law enforcement in Maine. I think we've reached a point where
No prosecuting attorneys. Is that what you were saying out
yeah.
there?
So we don't have a U.S. attorney in Maine right now.
What do you mean you don't have a U.S. attorney in Maine?
Trump hasn't appointed a U.S. attorney. The Biden U.S. attorney Darcy McElway did a few indictments at the federal level of some of the individuals involved in the Chinese drug cartels. Really, just the bare minimum. Very politicized office.
So Steve just said Darcy McElway did a few indictments at the federal level, and she was the individual involved in the original Department of Justice lawsuit against Maine. So I would assume to an extent the Maine authorities would have had to tell everything to the federal authorities, and as I'm explaining, they did not. So that's basically all we need to know from the Sean Ryan show. Really good podcast, probably my favorite one. up there with Tucker Carlson. Speaking of Tucker Carlson, he's addressed psychotropic meds. Look what it's doing to society. Like, we've had a bunch of LGBTQ school shooters and whatnot. When I was on these meds, I knew what my gender was, thank God, but I was essentially on autopilot. Like, my
Yeah.
consciousness wasn't fully there. And they do some spooky stuff that's not good for
Yeah.
anybody.
Kind of zombified, maybe.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I'm
going
glad
back
that
to that, oh, yep,
I'm glad that you were able to get off those.
thank you. Going back to that question on how I see this from a political standpoint, I think from a political standpoint, that's part of the problem in Maine, right? So Mary Mayhew is a Republican. She caused major problems, and Jean Lambrew was a Democrat, and she caused major problems. So I see this problem, because I'm not going to be biased, largely started with Paul LePage and Mary Mayhew. And the Democrats essentially followed suit because look how much money it provides the state. Why would they want to cut it out?
Right.
So I think they need to do a lot more of this from a legal standpoint with more federal supervision. Because it goes right up to the judges. That's how corrupt this is. You can try to go at it from so many angles, and they've already got those angles covered and shut down.
I mean, even with bills like LD 227, which allows any U.S. citizen, so any U.S. territory, uh, to come across Maine borders and get an abortion or gender affirming care, and that ties right into trafficking too. There's a lot of
Yeah.
loopholes for that to happen.
Speaking of trafficking, specifically child trafficking, RFK addressed how he apparently shut down HHS child trafficking. I mean, why are they involved in that in the first place? And I'm not accusing anyone of child trafficking, but Trump and Obama, right? As far as I know, they're on the Epstein list, as far as I know. Um, and Jean Lambrew was tied to Obama, and Trump was tied to Mayhew. So it's like, how did Jeffrey Epstein get all these kids? Probably kids from the foster care system and stuff like that. Not necessarily in Maine, but in general,
Oh,
it
I'll
kind
go
of
ahead and
adds up.
say it definitely is what's going on. I follow a survivor of that exact situation. She was thrown into foster care by her mother willingly and went to elaborate elite parties where she was drugged heavily, and she'd go back to her foster parents at early in the morning hours, go to school, nothing happened, and repeat, wash, same cycle.
Hmm.
And it's very sad. She escaped, and she's been on the run since 2020 because there's literally nobody who wants to help her.
Hmm. Yeah, that's basically what I'm encountering, but thankfully met I've made some friends, like I'm able to work, not as much as I'd like to, but things could be worse, essentially, is what I'm saying. Um, but I think it would be important for them to help me because I definitely have enough evidence, definitely have enough to show, right? But
Mhm.
hey, they're the ones in control or whatever. Um,
Yeah, it's very telling that they don't want to help you.
yeah. I feel like if they wanted to, they would have done so already.
Absolutely. And it wouldn't matter if you had a lawyer or not, they'd help you get one if they were about
Exactly.
helping the kids. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to add with the kickback scheme?
Well, I think the number one thing I could do was show Mainers how DHHS and a lot of your politicians have caused this to benefit the state and hurt children and the everyday taxpayer.
Do you have any last wishes or anything you'd like to put out there?
I'm hoping that the federal authorities step up to the bat and take this down. I mean, I guess Kash Patel and Pam Bondi made it one of their priorities to find trafficked children, and they have. They seem to care about white collar crime. I mean, they just apparently had to deal with a basketball scandal. But when it comes to this, I wasn't the only person. There was hundreds, probably thousands of kids, and the state has made millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars that they should not have made. And they're essentially making it right now because that is what caused a lot of the taxes to go up, a lot of the health insurance premiums to go up. So now would be the time to stop it and address it.
It's one of the worst crimes I feel going on in Maine, along with all the other stuff that Mills is benefiting from. CMP, Maine Health with her sister, CMP with her brother, the Chinese pot farms,
Yep.
child trafficking. It's just,
Yep.
it's awful. So I hope this falls upon the ears of people who want to step up and help and do something about it. I think this upcoming election year is going to be huge. And I know people like you especially are listening to the candidates and what they're going to do about these problems that you've brought to light.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an important hill for them to stand on. So Jacob, thanks for joining us again. And we'll look forward to a future update and hopefully some good news on the lawsuit side of this.
All right. Thank you.